Hi, everybody. Thank you for watching. I know I just kind of decided to do this, so I didn't announce that I was going to be doing a live, so it's perfectly okay if nobody's joining me. But if you are watching this live or on the replay, I shared the link for the video that I'm going to be referencing. I want to make it clear that this is not really a political post at all, and it's not about the person in this video. This is about emotion and feeling and being human, and just really wanting to stop this crazy idea, like really wanting to change how we all show up in the world, how allowing ourselves to be real. So I think probably most of you are aware of what is happening at the border, in the US-Mexican border. And this post isn't really about that specifically either, but it's hard to witness. I think no matter what side of the political aisle you're on, it's hard to watch children and parents in tears and hearing them cry and just vicariously experiencing all of that. It's not an easy thing to watch. And for many of us, as our way of coping, we shut it out. For others of us, it's getting really involved and trying to do something about it. No right or wrong, just it's how we tend to handle things. And what I wanted to talk about is in this video the link that I shared, this isn't about her. So whether you like her or you don't like her, it doesn't matter. The reason I'm sharing this video and the reason I'm doing this live right now, she had just gotten news of children, young children under the age of 4, being housed away from their parents and where they're being kept. And as she was reading it and taking this in, she became emotional. She's a journalist, and became emotional as she read from the AP where these children were, because we haven't really been told where the younger children or the girls have been kept. And as she read that these children were being kept and apparently the term that they use is tender age, which is a developmental, I think it came originally from where the children under the age of 4 are developmentally, and the impact of how different things can affect children under 4. And for any of you who have been following me for a while, or have an abuse history, you are aware of what it means to be traumatized as a child under the age of 4. Or as a child, I guess, period. But in reading this, she became emotional and she had a hard time actually getting the words out. And I think for many people watching it, we have a visceral reaction to that because her emotion touches our own emotion, whether it's about these children and families at the border or it's about something else, our own sadness, our own abandonment, our own abuse, trauma, whatever it is. But in this moment, she reacted to that. She was feeling all of these feelings that so many of us feel for all kinds of reasons around trauma and childhood trauma. And when I saw that, and I did see it last night, I thought it was a most beautiful moment. To witness somebody, I didn't expect to get emotional, but a beautiful moment to witness somebody not just reporting on the news, which I know historically that's kind of what they were supposed to do, but being human in that moment and feeling. And I'm sure she would have preferred not to be expressing that emotion, but just feeling it and feeling it so intensely that she was expressing it. And I thought it was beautiful. And I thought, this is what we need more of. We need people. Hi, Barbara. Yes, thank you. I absolutely thought so as well. But I felt so just good about her expression of emotion. And I thought, yes, we need so much more of that. And then this morning, I actually saw that she, I think fairly immediately after her show, and this was the very end of her show, that at the end of her show, afterwards on Twitter, she apologized. She apologized for becoming emotional, saying that she should be able to talk. And she did talk. She did express what she was supposed to be sharing, but she apologized for having emotion. And that in and of itself is sad. But she apologized for having emotion around something that if we don't have emotion, if we don't feel something, when we witness any child for any reason to be in pain, emotionally or physically, if we don't feel something about that, then what the hell is wrong with us? And for those of you who follow me and know the things that I talk about, I have spent my entire adult life feeling for child trauma, whatever that looks like. Most of that is around sexual trauma. And every day in this world, in this country, in the US, 1 in 3 girls is sexually abused and 1 in 5 to 6 boys is sexually abused. Every single day in this country, hundreds, if not thousands, of children are being abused by the very people who are supposed to love them. I don't want to take anything away from what is happening at the border and the trauma that these children are experiencing at the hands of a government. But every day in this world, children are traumatized in their own homes. And many of us who work in this field, many of us who have experienced this trauma, are all too aware of that reality. And I wish that all of this emotion and outrage, that people also recognize that this is happening in your neighborhood, not just along the border. And not just trauma because children are being taken by their parents, but children are being traumatized by their very parents, by the people who are supposed to protect them. Where is the outrage about that? Where are the marches about that? This isn't really where this was intended to go, but it's, as an advocate, as a social worker, as somebody who's been doing this work for as long as I have, we've been in the trenches. Social workers have been in the trenches, advocating and trying to change things. And people are not listening. We've had emotion. We have expressed emotion and been told, because most social workers are women, that it's just being emotional. Too sensitive. You're in the wrong line of work. No. Children are being traumatized every single day. Every single day. And if it takes what's happening at our border for people to start experiencing and allowing themselves to feel emotion for the atrocities that children all over the planet are experiencing every single day, then of course I don't want it to be happening. But I do think that it's an opportunity to talk about the reality of what children every single day, the kinds of trauma that children are experiencing every single day, what it means to them, what it means to somebody who is experiencing trauma and being silenced and not having voices heard, but not having people share all over social media about how wrong it is. They need voices too. And for any of us, whether you're a journalist, a social worker, just an average human being, allowing our voices to be heard when we feel that something isn't okay, when we express sadness, outrage, heartbreak, frustration over something that we see that is not okay, don't then apologize for feeling the emotions that are tied to the violence and the trauma and the social injustice in the world. Don't apologize. Rachel Maddow is who I'm speaking of. That moment, I do like you, and I follow you, and I watch your show, and I think that you do a lot of really great work. But to witness that last night, you were more real in that moment, and from my perspective, more powerful in that moment than anything else that you've ever reported on. And we need to stop, as individual human beings in our own families, as community members, as professionals, as coaches, as politicians. We need to stop the idea that it's not okay to feel, and that feeling is weakness, and that we're being too sensitive. If we are not sensitive or empathetic to the kinds of things that children all over the world are experiencing, then what the hell is wrong with us? There's no apology for feeling. There's no apology for being emotional when something like this is going on. And it is up to us in this moment. It shouldn't be. It should have happened a long time ago. But we have an opportunity in this moment to not only fight for those injustices that are happening at the border, but also keep in mind the injustices happening everywhere in the world, in our very own country, and feel the feeling, feel the sadness, the anger, because anger is secondary to hurt and fear. And it makes complete sense that we are feeling hurt and fear right now, especially in the US with what is happening with our government. If we cannot feel hurt and fear and express that emotion in times like this, then who are we? And there are so many injustices that are happening every single day in this country. I think it's important that we look at all of it. Take this as an opportunity to not only just fight for changing what's happening now, and apparently there's going to be some shift that's going to happen, but let us not forget that every moment in this country, across the world, children are being traumatized in so many different ways. And of course, we feel something. What does it say about us if we don't? Think about that. When you feel like it's not okay to be emotional, it's not okay to be angry, it's not okay to be in that vibration of having difficult emotions come up, or being frustrated, or wanting to yell from the rooftops. What does it say about you if that doesn't bring up those kinds of emotions? And I'm not suggesting that this is something bad about you, but just generally, what does it say about us if we don't feel those things? And this goes back to the video that I did, I think last week or the week before, about suicide and how do we end up in that place? The same reasons. Because we think that there's something wrong with feeling, because we don't want to express ourselves, because we're afraid of what people are going to think. It has to stop. And I ask any of you who have any sort of public presence, big or small, doesn't matter, in your own families, in your own circle of friends. I know it's not easy, but we have to start being true to ourselves and what we're feeling and what we're experiencing, and share it, speak it, so that other people know that it's not wrong to feel, to have emotion. Please start small. Start with your friend, one-on-one. It doesn't have to be a political issue. What I'm speaking about now is not a political issue. This is about being human, about tearing down the ideas of what it means to be strong and what we think it means to be weak. That's bullshit. And it was really created because people didn't want to feel. And so they said, the people in power said, nope, that's weakness. There's something wrong with you. Because they didn't want to feel it. And so they didn't want other people to feel it either, because it might trigger their own feelings. So that's weakness. Saying people are sensitive. That was about people in power. And that could be a family member even. It doesn't have to be government. People who have a power dynamic saying, nope, I don't want to see that. I don't want to have to do anything about it. Don't feel it. It's wrong to feel it. We have the ability to start to change that by showing up more authentically. And if you think that showing up authentically means that you don't express emotion, or if you think that you can show up authentically and never express emotion, well, I think it's time to reevaluate what it really means to be authentic. No matter what role you have in this world, it doesn't matter. Being authentic means being real, no matter what that looks like. Maybe it's emotion. Maybe it's not going with the status quo, having a different opinion, not jumping on a bandwagon, whatever it is. Follow your own voice, your own truth. And when you're feeling something, feel it. Feel it. And when enough of us are able to do that, we will shift. There will be a paradigm shift of what it means to be strong. An absolute shift. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, when people think of the people who are strong, it will not be dictators. It will not be people who led by having this persona of not feeling. It will be the people who spoke through the tears, who shared a differing opinion, who showed up and shared vulnerably the thing that they were most afraid to share. That is what will be seen as strength and courage and true authenticity. And I'm not claiming to be perfect at that. So I do want to make that clear. I'm not saying that I am the pillar of all that is authentic and courage and all of that, because we're human and we're going to get caught up in that. But we need to change the message of what it means to be strong, and that emotion is somehow not okay. Oh, sorry about that noise just then. Yeah, it made me cry. I thought it was wonderful, exactly what everyone was feeling. It has been, and I think sometimes seeing other people who we wouldn't expect it from, especially, have emotion come up and be able to express that emotion, it so easily connects with the emotion that we've tried hard to not express. So completely agree, Barbara. If we don't care for children, we have no hope. Yeah, absolutely. So tired of others telling me I'm too sensitive. It's all the sadness that I have in my heart, witnessing all the horrible things going on. Yes. And that idea of you're too sensitive or you're a sensitive soul, again, that comes from like, that's a bad thing. Actually, if you really think about it, what does it mean to be human if we don't have sensitivity towards others? Our inability to have sensitivity towards others is very directly also connected to the sensitivity that we're able to have for ourselves, the compassion that we're able to have for ourselves. And it is imperative that we connect to our sensitivity, because it is there. We are born being sensitive souls. We are born with tenderness. We are born with strength. We are born with all of that, but we lose sight of that. We lose our connection to that because of the messages that we're given in our own families by our caregivers, but also by the people around us and our communities and our kind of what's become normal, or our norms in society, what we see as injustice or not. All of those things influence our ideas of what it means to be human and good and strong. And we really need to shift that. But the only way that we can shift it isn't by telling people how to show up. It's by allowing ourselves to show up in whatever way that means. And I'm not suggesting that you have to get on Facebook or somewhere else and cry. I'm really not trying to suggest that at all. But it means when you're having a conversation with somebody and you feel emotional, feel it, express it. Don't apologize for crying. There are so many people. In fact, Rachel Maddow last night, she apologized in that moment. Like, oh, I need to stop. I need to take a break. Feel it. And certainly don't go on Twitter the next day and apologize for it. And this isn't a criticism. This is something that most of us do. It took me a long time to stop apologizing for feeling emotional. And those of you who have been following me for any length of time or know me personally, you know that I cry. I cry. There's so much to cry about. My son even jokes that because he gets emotional about things, and he will cry at times when he's talking about different kinds of things, and he often credits me for being like that. But of course I cry. I am faced every day with the reality of childhood trauma. Every day, in some capacity, I am faced with that reality. And what's happening at the border is obviously well, that's not new, it's actually been going on in different ways, but it's just become much more known to everybody. But again, I'm glad that people are outraged at what is happening. But I also hope that those of you who are so outraged and using your platforms and your media presence to talk about the atrocity that's happening at the border, think about all children. Think about your neighbor, those children that you see at the park, those children in the schools. And think about what's happening to the millions of children in our very own country that is not for public consumption, that the news media isn't going on location to report about. Because every day in a child's home, they are being traumatized by the very people who are supposed to be protecting them. Maybe try using your voice for that too. Try using your presence, your leadership, your place in the world for calling out all childhood trauma. And I know it can be hard because you don't know what you can do about it. You can do the same things that you're doing now. Speaking, sharing, not letting it die down, just like school shootings or any mass shooting. There's all this outrage and stuff that happens, and then it dies down until the next time. But every day, children are being shot. Every day, children are being traumatized. And nothing is being done about it. Continue to use your voice. Continue to feel the outrage. Your neighbors, your friends' neighbors, your children's classmates. Children are being traumatized everywhere. Oh, sorry. Yeah, people become numb to it. You're so right, Tracy. And I think that, you've heard me talk about all the time, we use denial as a way of coping. We use rationalizing and numbing as ways of coping. And then it is often something like this that allows people to feel outraged because you're not alone in it. Everybody is most people are feeling kind of outraged about this. And when it comes to your neighbors, it is harder because it feels much more tangible because it's right there in your own neighborhood, or your own family even. And it's a lot harder to know what to do. But this is a start. Talking about it, feeling it, expressing it. All of that is how we bring attention to all of the childhood trauma that is happening in this world. Hi, Katarina. Tracy, your voice reaches far enough. It absolutely, every time that we speak up, even to a friend or a family member or the person standing in line reading that front page news article, every time that we communicate something to another human being, we're making a difference. We're sharing, we're creating conversation. And that's how things change, one conversation at a time. It doesn't have to be in a huge public format. When I think about my message, what my ultimate message is, and how it started, and the fact that that, just the people who find me on YouTube get to hear the message and reach out to me. That is a small group of people, really, in the scheme of things. It's a very small group. The people that follow me on Facebook is a relatively small group of people, yet I still show up. I still keep talking about the same things that I always talk about, because it's the continued conversations over and over again is how things begin to change. It's having those videos out there. And I'm not saying other people need to do videos, but I'm just kind of making the point of, it's just continuing to have conversations that create bigger conversations. We start with one person. I started with one-on-one work, as you well know. And then I started doing videos that only a few people were seeing, and then more people were seeing, and I did more videos, and I do more Facebook Lives. I start sharing different things. I share my little graphics. Every time that we share something, it makes a difference to a person. And then that person shifts. Bigger conversations happen. And then bigger conversations, and then it reaches another person that we never knew that it might have reached. Maybe had no intention on it ever reaching that many people. My YouTube subscriber list is still fairly small. But I know that there are people who watch. I know that there are people who will take a small nugget of something that I've said and will feel that on a visceral level, and it will shift something for them. And we all have the power to do that. We all have the power to do that in our everyday conversations. The more authentically, the more vulnerably that we can show up in those one-on-one conversations, in our small little communities, whether it's social media or in real life, the more that we can express ourselves and again, feel what we feel, no matter what that looks like. As scary as it may be, we begin to create this shift in our culture and in our world. That feeling is not only okay, but it's necessary. It is absolutely necessary to create a world that is accepting and loving and kind and compassionate. We need to see people who are willing to show up in whatever way they're feeling at that moment. And I know for most of you who are going to be watching this video, I know that you're already doing that in some small ways and in some really big ways in your own personal relationships, because you wouldn't be commenting publicly if you weren't doing that. You wouldn't be willing to talk about the things that I talk about if you weren't doing that. Or at least the things I talk about publicly. Not that everything that I talk about obviously is a big emotional kind of thing. So we just have to show up as ourselves wherever we're at in those moments. Oh, Katarina, thank you. That means a lot to me, honestly. Thank you. Every single voice matters and teaches people in ways you may never know. For me, I had no voice for so long. Yes, absolutely, our voice is a way of freedom. We'll be mute. Yes, and Journey to Freedom is kind of my thing, and that's so much of what I mean by that, is being able to not only feel the freedom from the weight of everything that we've been carrying around, but the freedom to be ourselves, to no longer feel that we have to hide, whatever that is, our histories, our experiences, but also our feelings, our desires, our dreams, our fears, whatever that is, being able to just be real with that for ourselves and not feel the fear of showing up in that way, not being able or being able to push through that and know that who we are and how we feel is perfectly okay. And not that we're perfect, but that we don't have to be perfect to be a voice, for it to be okay to share how we're really feeling. That is part of the journey to freedom, is getting to that place where we can recognize that no matter how we're feeling, that it's okay, it's more than okay. That is perfection in a sense, to show up no matter what. And to really shift. The more that we do that, we really begin to shift what it means to be strong. And that we can talk about hard stuff. We can feel difficult emotions. And that can be part of what it means to be positive. That we can experience gratitude while acknowledging the difficult things. In fact, the only way that we can really fully experience the full depth of what gratitude means is by also acknowledging the difficulties in life, whatever that looks like. I don't remember what the quote is and who said it or whatever, but you can only see the stars when it's dark, right? That's so true. And that's, I think, such a perfect example of the importance of allowing ourselves to see, to talk about, to face the reality of the difficulty in life, no matter what that looks like. Just stress of being a parent, even, just being honest about the difficulties in life, whatever that looks like. Because without that, if we can't fully acknowledge that, then the gratitude that we're feeling is not the full depth of gratitude that is available to us. If we never are sick, we never can fully understand what it means to have health. We can be grateful for our health, but we don't really understand the flip side to that, right? So we have to be able to really connect with, oh my God, how much it sucks to have the flu and what that feels like, or unfortunately, even more significant and serious medical issues. We can't fully appreciate the gratitude of health if we also don't understand what it means to not have that. We can't fully appreciate the gratitude of anything, I guess. Really, I'm having a hard time coming up with another example. If we don't also fully allow ourselves to understand what the opposite of that might be. So we can't, and I know that people talk about this, we can't fully experience the light if we're not willing to or recognize the opposite of that. And the more, again, coming back to this idea that the more we talk about that, all of it, that nothing will change. We will keep seeing people being traumatized, and we'll have these movements of people standing up, but then it will go away. Meanwhile, children are still being traumatized. So we have to be able to face the realities of everything that is around us. Doesn't mean stay stuck there. And it can feel overwhelming. Like, how can I, as one person, do something about this? you can do something about this as one person by sharing how you feel about it, by being willing to feel the sadness. Part of the reason that people often feel so completely overwhelmed by things, by difficult emotions when we're faced with the realities of what's happening in the world, is because we try not to feel that. And so when something happens that kind of forces it in our, it's kind of right there in our face, and we don't have the ability we don't have the real ability any longer to kind of just push it aside, it becomes so overwhelming because it's not just feeling it in this moment for this one thing. It's because all of a sudden you become painfully aware of all of the emotion that you've tried not to face. You become painfully aware of the reality that children have been separated from their parents at the border for a long time. Not typically asylum seekers, although that sometimes does happen, but it's all of it at once. And that's also one of the difficulties, going back to my work in the world of childhood trauma, that, what do you do about it as an individual person? Well, you certainly can't go around to every house in your neighborhood and knock on the door and ask if a child is okay. But you can talk about it. When you hear a story, you can acknowledge even to yourself the reality that it's not just that child. You can feel the pain of what it means to live in a world that children are being abused every day. And when we can talk about it, we don't stay stuck there. We don't just get there and stay there. When we can talk about it, we can also then talk about the fact that healing is possible. And that if more people were talking about it, then children would feel safer to come forward when it happens. That people would know how to respond when a child comes forward. So yes, it can be difficult, but when we can talk about it, we create an environment that is no longer stigmatizing. We create an environment where people can learn what to do when these conversations come up, or when a child comes to you, or when you suspect that something may be happening. We create an opportunity to have bigger conversations. And domestic violence is another one. Like, well, what can I do? I let her know that I'm here for her, but she won't leave. Well, we just keep having conversations. We keep having conversations. And when we feel like we have a voice, that kind of heaviness of those conversations doesn't feel as intense, because we're actually using our voice and we're creating those conversations. I've noticed how much better I feel overall now that I express my emotions more. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that, Jenny. And it does shift. It's hard at first. And you sometimes feel a lot more intensity of emotion, because you're feeling that emotion for all kinds of things, not just for what's happening in that moment. Not apologizing for feeling is something that takes a lot of practice. It really does, because it's so habitual. It's so instinctual that as soon as we feel something or express an emotion, it's just habit that we go to that place of apologizing. So it really does take a lot of practice over and over again to not apologize. Kind of like taking a compliment. It takes a lot of practice to just be able to take it in, take a breath, and say thank you, instead of getting all anxious or saying something to discount that compliment. Candace, thank you. You're going to make me cry again. That means a lot. Thank you. Hi, Jessie. Well, thank you for those of you who have watched. And I really just want to challenge you. And like I said, I am not perfect. I have felt a lot of things, had thoughts about things that I wanted to bring up when I haven't agreed with something in different areas. And I haven't, because, well, there's been different reasons depending on what it is, but I have held back at times. And when I come back to the reality of who am I in this world, and not just in my work, but what is it that drove me to social work? What is it that drove me to be an advocate? I do come back to that truth that I have to speak up, and I have to, when I see something that doesn't feel okay to me, when I experience something that feels like it's perpetuating shame or stigma, it's been a practice lately of me coming back to that truth of how I want to show up, and I haven't done that very consistently. So it's a work in progress, and like I said, none of us can do it fully all the time, but taking those moments when we can and practicing sharing our thoughts, our opinions, our emotions in those individual conversations. Again, this doesn't have to be in a big public way, just our one-on-one conversations. That's how things change. They don't change all of a sudden in a big global way. They change one person at a time. Because even with what's happening at the border, yes, people are having conversations, people are changing, this policy is supposedly, as of today, I think something's supposed to be changing with it. But real change, real consequential change isn't really happening because of all the outrage of what's happening at the border. Consequential change, paradigm shifting change is going to happen by the people who continue to have these conversations over time. How we show up in individual conversations, our willingness to continue to talk about the trauma that children experience when they're separated from their parents, whatever that might look like, even when it's because of the parents' actions themselves. And I'm not talking about illegal border crossing, I'm talking about in their own homes and stuff like that. We have to continue having these conversations. So certainly if you've shared anything here, you've been a part of that. But I also just want to challenge you to think about, how can I be a part of a conversation today or tomorrow where I can talk about how I'm feeling about something that's difficult, whatever that is. It could be your dog died recently, whatever. I mean, it doesn't have to be about the things that everybody else is talking about, but just being willing to share what's on your heart, what's in your mind, what you've been wanting to say but have held back. So think about that. How can you bring yourself to a conversation like that in the next couple of days? And I'd love for you to share that with me. I'd love to celebrate how, especially in those small ways, we practice feeling and expressing what is true for us and how we're really feeling. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Pam. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Love you guys too. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and thank you for bearing witness for my feelings, for my emotion, and for believing in and trusting me. Thank you. Thank you all for watching, whether you're live or watching on the replay, whether you're somebody who's following me on Facebook or watching this on a replay on YouTube. Thank you for standing with me as we create this shift on our planet, as we have the not so pleasant conversations sometimes. The only way we can heal as individuals, as communities, as a country, as a planet, is to have those conversations, sharing our truth and talking about the things that are going on in the world, in our communities, in our own homes that are difficult. Let's do this together, because we can. We absolutely can. There's no doubt that we have the power to do that. Thank you for being here. Whew.